Hi, everyone. There are a couple more things. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, there's a couple more people trickling in. So let me reiterate that use the Q&A down at the bottom if you want to ask questions. We're going to have time at the end. I'm going to talk for a few minutes. Then Jeff is going to talk and have a slideshow showing you some more details about our plan. So yes, please put your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat. As you're listening, you can go to the top right of your window and click on view to change what you see, especially if you want to see the slides bigger than the speaker. There are options up there. If you're using a phone, it's not that you usually don't have as many options. And then finally, while you're here on the computer looking around, check out our website as well, connectfairhaven.com. And that's where a lot of the information is going to be that we're discussing tonight. And as we keep moving forward, we're going to put all of the information there. And if you are interested in joining and learning more and working with us to bring fiber into Fairhaven, there is a sign up there to do as well. So to get started, I am Stephanie Gard. I have lived in Fairhaven since 1999. I live at the top of Mill Road. We raised our two children there. Our boys are now 19 and 26. My husband is a pharmacist and worked in Fairhaven for well over 10 years. And internet access has always been an issue for our family since we moved in 99, and that was dial-up. So technology has obviously changed, but all along we've struggled with quality internet. When I was asked to join this committee, I didn't join it right away, but I joined it in August of this past year, and I was extremely excited to get on it because I had investigated internet possibilities myself over the years, trying to find more competition, trying to find an alternative based on the experiences that I had had. So I was very excited to get on this committee. I felt that my loyalty was being penalized every time we had to renegotiate a contract. So becoming a member of this committee and working with the consultants who will be talking to you tonight as well, we learned a lot and had our eyes opened as committee members as to what the technology is today, what the limits are to the technology that exists today, and what the optimal internet solution is when we're looking towards the future. And when I talk about ISP, I mean the internet service provider, whoever is giving you your internet into your house. So I tend to use ISP for that. Personally, I have worked from home for over 15 years. I'm a retired attorney who had to stop working to raise one of my sons with special needs. And I started working from home and became an operations manager of a nonprofit. And being a nonprofit that is online, I rely heavily. It's my tool to be on the internet all the time. Our phone system is through the internet. Our CRM database management is through the internet. My boss is in Marietta, Georgia. So the internet has been a tool for my business for over 10 years. And so only having the option of one internet service provider has been very clear to me that the service keeps going down, the prices keep going up. I don't have a big ability to negotiate. So, you know, on top of all of that, we started looking at our budget, and we had to start doing things to tone down the budget hit that having the internet was taking on our finances. We've done things like we have our own router, we have our own modem. We've done a lot of work with streaming services. All of this requires internet. So you take all of the struggles with our budgets and our finances as families, and you add COVID to the equation. And I think a year ago, we started to realize even more how important the internet was and how limited it was for some of us. My son was finishing his senior year of high school, and about a year ago today was sent home from school and had to start online classes. I want to say by the 13th, he was doing online classes. So he and I were working throughout the day to manage our Zoom meetings and team meetings and all of that. And I think that COVID really focused the spotlight on the internet, not just as a luxury anymore, but it was an essential tool for all of us. We were fortunate. My son and I were able to work it out. I know families that had 5 or 6 people every day trying to work with the same bandwidth, to compete against the same bandwidth that was provided to them. I think as a committee, every time we've met, we learn more information and we come to conclusions as to what would be best for us in Fairhaven as homeowners, as business owners, as Fairhaven as a town itself. There were several really important factors for me as we've gone along, and they're spelled out in our broadband plan, our master plan, which is available on the website as well, and it continually changes as we make more decisions and we find out more information. The first piece that was so important was bringing the leverage back to us as consumers, and the competition was the number one thing for me. This plan involves bringing some competition back in. I think the second part, and I know that the committee felt very strongly about this, was that people needed to be able to opt out of this. No one in Fairhaven is going to be forced into doing anything with the internet. They can stay with their own services. I think what the committee feels is that once you hear more about it and you learn more about it, just like us, you are going to be excited to become a part of it. But it was important to us that no one feel like they were being pressured or feel like that they had to join it. And at this point, the options that we have make sure that there's an opt-out for anyone in Fairhaven, business or resident, who feels that it's not for them. We wanted to maximize our value. And what you will hear tonight is by increasing our speeds, both uploading and downloading, which many of us have very limited upload speeds because of the contracts that are available to us. That's big with Zoom. I mean, hopefully I'm not buffering, but I also made sure everyone in the house turned off their internet right now so that I wouldn't do that. But my video coming to you is an upload for me. And a lot of us have very limited upload contracts. So by getting uploads and downloads that are not only the same, but really fast is important to us. The reliability is going to increase, keeping local control. And there's a huge value added to Fairhaven. That's what we're seeing on the committee. A town that adds a fiber type network like this is going to see value in their homes, value in their businesses, and value as a whole. Fairhaven as a whole will see a lot of value added by having its own fiber network. And for some of you, I'm hoping some of you are the ones who answered the surveys. Thank you to those who answered the surveys. We sent out surveys in the water bill. If you're a well owner like myself, you did not get a water bill. It was available on social media as well, but we had a very significant response, and those responses are also highlighted in the plan. But what came out of those responses was also very significant and led the committee to moving forward to where we are today. You shared a lot of our concerns, a lot of our interests, and we made sure that we incorporated that as we move forward. I think the other thing I noticed about the surveys that bugged me as someone who lives in Fairhaven is the fact that, first of all, the speeds were all over the place and the prices were all over the place. The contracts changed depending on maybe who you were negotiating with when you got the new contract. Some of the things we're looking at in our plan is to have it very uniform, that anyone in Fairhaven can pay the same price and get the same speeds. It's not going to involve as much of the negotiations. However, you may have a couple of internet service providers, so they're going to compete for your business. And that was a real big plus for us and important when we saw the surveys coming back. I think I have a couple of things as you listen to Jeff tonight to keep in mind. First of all, this is fiscally doable for us. This is something that the town of Fairhaven can accomplish. There are different ideas on how to accomplish it. There are things that we've talked about, but this is something that is fiscally doable for us. There's a huge return on the investment. As homeowners and business people in Fairhaven, you're going to see results in lower bills, in better service, in better speeds, huge speeds. And if you're thinking about the idea that we're building it and no one's going to come, it's good to understand that our consultants have already talked to us about the fact that there are probably at least 2 internet service providers who would come in right away and want to provide service to the town of Fairhaven on a network if we move forward. So we're not building it and waiting for companies to come. They're there waiting for us to build it. So I think what we've learned over the past year, and what I've learned over the years too, is that the internet is a necessity, and we need to level the playing field, I think, and learning how the tech, which is something I think we might cover tonight too, learning how the tech is available, that's available now may not last that much more in the future, or that there are other options out there, is really important to the town of Fairhaven. And it's not a luxury to have the internet anymore. And we want to make sure everyone has equal access to it. So I really appreciate you listening to me. I appreciate all of my committee members who volunteered their time over the past year to learn this information and to be ready to come to all of you in the town and be ready to talk about it. And we hope as you learn that you contact us, keep an open mind as you listen to it, but we are ready for all of your questions. And the one person who's going to help answer those questions is Jeff Christensen from Entry Point Networks. And I'm going to turn it over to him now.
Excellent. Thanks, Stephanie. And thanks everybody for taking time. We know you're busy and have things to do at 7 o'clock on a weeknight. So we'll try and be concise, but still be available for any questions that come in after we run through a little presentation here. We did have an excellent committee that was made up of some people from the town, but a majority from the community, and everybody showed up for our meetings at least monthly. And the meetings were often for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and the committee did an excellent job representing the people in Fairhaven. So in terms of key ideas that we wanted to cover, one of the first is that we still think about the internet as a nice to have. And by that, I don't mean that we do individually think that way, but as a society and from a policy point of view, we're not at the point where we're treating connectivity the way we treat and think about water, sewer, and electricity. COVID probably has really moved the dial on this, where so many of us are working from home or doing school from home and doing myriad other things. Today's a significant day in the country because legislation was introduced into the House of Representatives for a $100 billion, that's with a B, internet access bill at the federal level. And we don't know whether this will be passed or not, but it is an acknowledgement from the federal government that we need to be more serious about broadband. And that's really what the Fairhaven town leaders have been really foreshadowing, is that this is important for the community and we need to be real deliberate in the way we think about this. So a question for all of you and for your neighbors is whether broadband is now at the level that we need to treat the infrastructure like utility infrastructure. Is it still a nice to have, or in reality with the digital economy, is this infrastructure essential infrastructure? So one way to think about it is it the fourth utility? Another category that's important to understand is what technologies are available today and what can these technologies do? DSL is the technology that primarily the telephone companies have utilized. So when the internet emerged, the cable companies and the telephone companies saw it both as a threat and as an opportunity. And they quickly figured out, and they were working on it. The telephone companies were involved in the emergence of the internet. But they quickly figured out how to run this technology over their existing infrastructure. And some of that infrastructure was DSL. So DSL has been widely used by the phone companies. Its upper limit is really 100 megabits. If you're on DSL, so Verizon would be the DSL provider in Fairhaven. If you're on DSL, you may not see 100 megabits. That's the download speed. The upload speeds will be significantly lower, but that's sort of an optimistic threshold for DSL. A lot of people are talking about Starlink and low orbit satellites currently. So Starlink is Elon Musk's satellite company. There are other satellite technologies. There's HughesNet and various others. The people I'm talking to that are on this technology now are seeing 100, 110 on the download speed and around 10 on the upload. Price point is 99. What they're paying is 105, 106 bucks a month for something a little better than DSL. So that technology is out there. It's not going to, it really is targeting people in very rural areas. It in no way can compete with fiber in terms of its capacity, and it's not meant to compete with fiber. It's really for people that live miles and miles away from fiber optic networks. The other is cable, and the majority of people in Fairhaven are on a cable system. Sort of the upper end, the optimistic end of cable capability is a gig, which is 1,000 megabits per second. And and then the download, again, as Stephanie alluded to, is much lower than that. It's asymmetrical in nature, which means different upload than download speed. And then there's 5G, which there's a lot of advertising about. 5G is really the next generation of cellular networks. And, 2 gigs is probably quite optimistic for 5G, but that's what the industry is touting, is that it'll have that capacity. I think actual experience might be closer to 1 gigabit, but we'll go with the industry numbers. The reality for 5G is that it doesn't work without fiber. So we say with wireless that wireless works best the faster it gets to fiber. And depending on which flavor of 5G people are talking about, if it's the nanocells, then you've got to have fiber in really close proximity, like every 1,500 feet. So the microcells require this dense fiber network, which is very close to fiber to the home. It's very close to the same sort of density of fiber. And then the other technology is fiber optics. And this graphic is meant to illustrate the difference in capacity between DSL, low orbit satellite, cable, and 5G. So this is not unrealistic. This is not a pie in the sky. Fiber actually can do, they've demonstrated fiber at 170 million megabits per second. So we're showing 25 million megabits per second. There are tests of sending a signal 1,000 kilometers at 170 million megabits per second, and which means that we haven't hit the upper threshold of fiber capacity. And the limits of fiber are really, the limits aren't in the fiber itself, the limits are in the electronics that connect to the fiber. And the electronics will get better and better over time. And they're figuring out how to utilize fiber to offer more capacity. So when you think about the reality that most people today in Fairhaven have less than, let's say less than 500 megabits per second, I think that's safe to say. And that the capacity of fiber is in the millions of megabits per second. Hopefully it's clear that when we say this is a future-proof technology, it is future-proof, meaning it's 50-year technology. Even if they come up with something that's better than fiber, it's hard to imagine a scenario where we're going to need something more than 25 million megabits per second. Those speeds are just sort of mind-blowing, actually. Another key thing is that for 99% of the networks in the country today, whether they're cable, most implementations of fiber or DSL, they're using some kind of splitter technology. And what really is happening is that most homes are sharing with their neighbors. And the usual splits are either at 32 or 64, which means most people are sharing their connection with either 31 neighbors or 63 neighbors. And that affects reliability. So when these companies tell you that your speeds will be up to something, what they mean by that is they can't really tell you what your speed's going to be because your speeds are impacted by all of your neighbors. And that's a key thing because 99% of the networks in the country are architected or designed this way. You either need a really fast network so that you're not noticing what your neighbors are doing, or you need a different kind of network. And what we've encouraged the committee is to think about a switched network where everybody has a direct connection into a switch. And what that means is everybody's on their own network. So that your neighbors are not affecting your reliability. And these switches have been around. This is the way data centers are designed. The world that's emerging is a world where we're going to need reliability because everything's going to get connected to this network. And by everything, what we mean is there's a trend toward hospital at home, which means a lot more healthcare is going to happen in the home, which means devices like IV pumps are going to be in the home. We already know that education is happening across these networks. People are working on doing their work at home across these networks. But we're also, there's a lot of emerging technology which will be sensor informed and AI impacted. And the network reliability is going to become an increasingly important issue. We also referred to this. I would say again that 99% of the networks in the country are asymmetrical, which means the download speed is much better than the upload speed. And with fiber, there really is no reason to have an asymmetrical network. Fiber networks should be designed to be symmetrical so that people have abundant bandwidth on both the download and the upload. And so that's another key thing that we're looking for in terms of a different kind of network. We want it to be not shared with neighbors. We want it to be fiber, and we want it to be symmetrical. Another key idea that we've spent a lot of time on with the committee is this idea of separating the infrastructure and the services. The history for telecom and cable is that these things have been commingled and that services really are synonymous with whoever controls the infrastructure. So I would bet that everybody on this call has the same ISP as they have for the owner of the infrastructure. So if you're on a cable network, whoever owns that cable network is also going to be your ISP. What we've talked about is creating an infrastructure operator, and we have a deep belief in local ownership of infrastructure because the infrastructure is locally important. So if you have local control and ownership of infrastructure, and you've got a local company operating that infrastructure, what we advocate is to push services to the cloud. And by that, we also mean the internet service provider. So part of what we advocate for is ISPs in the cloud, which allows for competition. It gives consumers choice. It also exposes the ISP to innovation, which means a competing ISP may figure out how to automate, to deliver better customer service, more responsive information to customers, et cetera. So that all becomes possible once you move the ISP to the cloud and you create this separation between the infrastructure and service. So the metaphor that we use a lot as a company is this metaphor, which is we need to run our digital roads the same way we run our physical roads. So the way cable companies and the legacy phone companies run their networks, they build their own digital road, connect it to the big internet, and nobody else operates on that road. And the analogy for the physical roads is that it would be akin to giving FedEx their own road and giving UPS their own road. That doesn't make sense, and we don't think it makes sense anymore to have one road for the cable company, another road for the telephone company, and then have some overbuilder come in and create a third road. So we advocate for one really robust road that's open and allows any service category and any service provider, as long as they follow the rules, as long as they're not doing things malicious, let anybody operate on that road. And we run our airports this way, we run our road systems, and now we're saying we should run our digital infrastructure the same way. So this is just an example of how this can work. So when the service providers moved to the cloud, this is the kind of interaction that consumers can have. So you would go in, look at your options for ISP, look at the pricing, and once you find the ISP that you want to utilize, there's some legal stuff. And then when you hit subscribe, because they're in the cloud, software can create the connection. So we go up to the dashboard and we now have an ISP. If you decide you want to switch ISPs, you just unsubscribe and the connection is broken down and you can go back out and select a new internet service provider. So this is called open access. And by open access, it means it's open to any service provider. And this is one instantiation of what that looks like. All right. So Stephanie referred to the survey that we had out on the Fairhaven website, broadband website. This is a summary of the results. So you can see, and this is in the broadband report, so you can go pull that off the website and get access to this information. We will also put, I think, a video recording of this webinar and probably this slide deck also out on the website. So this information will be readily available to you. So first question, how many would support a fiber network? We had total response was 643 responses. 99.68% said they would support that. How important is internet speed? 98.73%. Then we asked people to go out and check their current connection speeds, and we had an average download of 151 and an average upload of 13. So that gets to what Stephanie was talking about, which is the challenge is not so much on the download speed as it is on the upload speed. And things like Zoom are consuming upload. Importance of choice in ISP and plans, 96% are, so I'm sorry, I'm giving you totals. On the very important, we had 78%. On the somewhat important, we had 18%. I got to go back you can see it. We were at 77% on supporting fiber, and on very important on speed, 72%. So apologize for that. And then the last one, rate current ISP, you can see the breakdown from poor to fair. That's over, between 50 and 60%. And then good was about 30%. And then a very small percentage in terms of very good or excellent. All right. In terms of what people are paying, there's what is listed out on the web. So we can go to these companies and see what they list as their standard pricing. And then we also asked in the survey what their bills actually look like. And so there are line items in the bill which increase the actual cost that people are paying. And I think people know that. What we've got here is for the different speed tiers, what the standard pricing is and what the introductory. So we know that there's this thing where if you'll sign up, then for 12 months or for 6 months or for 18 months, it can change. You're going to pay X, and then it'll revert over to standard pricing. And so those are both shown here. For Verizon, they've got DSL, and the reality there is they just don't have much in terms of download or upload, and so very few people are on those plans. So I'm going to move this up. I'm going to minimize a little so you can see that. The monthly billing for Xfinity, the average, I think 179 is what people are paying. And I think, Devin will have to clarify, but I think that includes cable. That's not just internet.
For some of them. Okay. Some of them we could not break it out. Most of them we did break it out, and it doesn't include cable.
Okay. All right. So it's expensive, whether it does or doesn't. When you're adding your cell phone bill, your cable bill, your internet access, families are spending a lot of money on these technologies. This is showing on a cost per megabit basis what people are paying. So if you look at, let's just focus on Xfinity. If you're getting the 100 megabit speed, the average cost, and I think this is the reported cost from the survey, $93.60 for the 100 megabit speed. What we're projecting, we think it's going to be doable to build a network for a symmetrical gig, 1,000 up, 1,000 down, in the $55 range. We haven't hardened those numbers yet, but we think that's going to be achievable. So that means that cost per megabit is going to be 0.05, so basically a nickel per megabit, compared to nearly $1 for what people are paying today. So there's big delta there. All right, municipal light plant. For everyone that pays attention to this in Fairhaven over the next 2 months, you're going to hear about municipal light plant. And the reason municipal light plant is important is that the authority the town has to build a network comes under the Massachusetts state law that is branded the municipal light plant law. So there are 21 states in the country that either they don't allow cities and towns to build this infrastructure, or if they do, there are restrictions there's a bunch of hurdles they've got to work through in order to do it. So there are barriers or straight out prohibitions in 21 states. Massachusetts, fortunately, is one of the states where cities and towns are allowed to build this infrastructure, build and operate it. But the state law under which we can do it is this municipal light plant law. So there's an article that will go to the town meeting in May, and the town meeting members will be asked to vote up or down on municipal light plant. And so that's why it's important, is the town, in order to do this, they have to have a vote authorizing the town to establish a municipal light plant. That doesn't mean the town is then going to become an electric utility provider. It means that the town will have the authority to build out a broadband network. It's just the way the statute is organized. So what has to occur for the town to get a green light to go forward? First, the town meeting members have to vote affirmatively for the municipal light plant with a 2/3 majority. And it has to happen at 2 different town meetings. So this will be the first. So it could pass on the first one and then not pass on the second. It's got to be a 2/3 majority or greater in 2 consecutive town meetings. Those 2 town meetings need to be held at intervals of not less than 2 months and not more than 13. So it's somewhere in the, you can't have, if you have the town meeting in May, which will occur, there is an article, we would then need to wait at least 2 months for a special town meeting where the second vote could take place. If it passes at the first town meeting, then the select board would decide when the second vote would occur, and it would be somewhere between the second and the 13th month. If it clears both the first and the second town meeting, so there is a 2/3 majority, then the select board would be responsible for selecting either a light plant board or they would appoint a manager, and they'll decide, they'll work with the attorneys in terms of setting it up. But that's basically the roadmap. That's what's got to occur to give the town the authority to do something. So a key idea that we've talked about is, Stephanie said this is financially doable for the town. A natural concern is going to be for everybody, what is this going to cost? And we like to redirect that question to what are people already paying? So what was stated in the survey is that the average cost, average monthly internet cost, internet alone without cable, was $102. That's with line items and other fees. The national cost, the national average has been hovering right around $70. But if you look at the 102, that means that the residents of Fairhaven are paying something close to $8 million per year, and over 20 years, $160 million. The reason we've got 20 years on there is that this kind of infrastructure usually will get financed over a 20-year period. And so we like people to be fully aware of what the cost is, the total cost to build, but also what does that mean in terms of a monthly cost per family or per household. And the reason we redirect the question back to a monthly is that's what people are used to paying now. So we pay for this month by month. Currently, we're all renters of these networks. So none of us are owners, we're all renters, except for those cities that have built their own networks. We're advocating that Fairhaven become an owner and that all the residents of Fairhaven be able to also be owners, which means be able to pay off this infrastructure. So yeah, our projected total investment is 17 million for this network. So you can see if it's an annual total spend right now of 8 million, we're seeing the infrastructure 17 million. Once you finance that over a 20-year period, you can see that this is doable. All right, so recommendations from the committee are these. Open access so that there's competition and choice. Pursue an opt-in or voluntary model so that nobody's forced to participate. Pursue an RFP for design and build. So that would harden the cost so we know can we tell people what this is going to cost them on a monthly basis with 98% confidence. Pursue an RFP for an open access partner, which means that's the technology that would move the ISP to the cloud. And then utilize the municipal light plant structure to go forward. So those are the recommendations that came out of the broadband committee and went to the select board. Next steps are, this vote will take place in May at the town meeting from the town meeting members. Between now and then, we're going to do a lot of community engagement. So you're doing it tonight by attending this webinar. We're going to start to distribute yard signs. We're hoping that if you're supportive of this, that you would be willing to have a yard sign in your yard, in your front yard. So that, to just elevate awareness, drive people to the website. If we're able to establish a municipal light plant, and if we're able to get a sustainable number of participants from the town, then the network construction would go forward. So we want to mitigate the risk for the town by making sure that we've got the demand or the level of interest that's needed to make it sustainable. If that occurs, then, and if the municipal light plant is established, then construction would go forward. All right, and then lastly, there's a bunch of information out on the website, connectfairhaven.com. And I'm going to be quiet now, and we're going to go to questions.
Okay, so we've had a couple of questions submitted. The first is, do you have any notion on how many ISPs that would be available to a town like Fairhaven when services are in open access? I can foresee a situation where only 1 or 2 ISPs are available to subscribe to. So while Entry Point has provided a fiber optic infrastructure, it's still being forced into the expensive packages or package deal through Xfinity or Verizon when all I want is internet access and not TV. So do you want to address the internet service providers we anticipate being available, Jeff?
Sure. So once you move the ISP to the cloud, then part of the magic is the fact that you could have an ISP in California, or you could have an ISP in Idaho, or you could have an ISP in Texas. And because they really are software companies at that point. So we already have one Massachusetts ISP asking to come on. This has been, this is in Indiana, it's in Idaho, in a couple of different networks in Idaho, it's in California. We've already had ISPs, multiple ISPs that are operating in this environment in these other states who have said they would like to come onto any network that implements this model. So it is an important issue. It's an important question. It's not one that we're worried about because because they don't have any responsibility for infrastructure, and because they're just software company, we've really lowered the barriers to entry, and the cost to them literally is less than $2,000 to come onto the network. Whereas in the alternative model, they would have to build an entire network. So it's very attractive to the ISPs because their cost structure is very low and the barriers to entry are very low.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that the recommended design that we're recommending to Fairhaven is that Fairhaven takes the edge of its network all the way to Boston, to the Internet Exchange Hotel in Boston, which means that any ISP in the country that can get a presence in that Internet Exchange Hotel can offer services to the town of Fairhaven without having to have a local presence in Fairhaven. And I think that's probably where the disconnect comes in. So the ISP doesn't have to be a local, they can be anywhere in the country. And we think because of that configuration, there will be many, many that will want to come on, because again, it's a very low barrier to entry for them to come in and offer services to a community of 16,000 plus people, right? Okay.
Yeah, one more note on this is that Quincy, Mass and Wilbraham are also moving down the same road. So any ISP that came onto the Quincy network would likely want to also come onto the Fairhaven network. So you're going to get some regional influence on this particular issue.
Okay. This is not a question. I think it's more of a statement. I just changed Xfinity plans to internet only, 1200, and he says megabits, but I think that's gigabits of data. But he says 1200 megabits of download for $95 per month. So I'm not sure what the question is, or if that's just a statement you wanted to make, but that's.
Well, let's talk about data caps.
Mm-hmm.
So they're part of the reason data caps are coming into play. So this whole unbundling movement where people want to consume their content over the top of the network, which means across the internet, is problematic for people for companies that have depended on triple play. So the cable companies started with cable TV, then the internet became a service, then the phone voice became a service. Mm-hmm. With the unbundling trend, which is a very strong trend, people are cutting the cord on their cable TV and just having the internet because they're trying to cut costs. And then they may have Netflix or they may have YouTube TV or whatever. That's problematic for the profitability of these companies. And so one way to remedy that, I mean, if you're going to go get YouTube TV coming across the internet, if you've got multiple people in a household watching TV or video content, one way to mitigate that problem is to put in data caps. That's not the only reason for data caps, but it's part of the strategy. So there was an announcement that data caps were going to be imposed throughout the Northeast. I think they pulled back somewhat on that implementation because of all of the pushback they got. But the network that Fairhaven is contemplating will have no data caps. So it's the target is 1,000 up, 1,000 down, no data caps. So the 1,000 up, 1,000 down is your speed capacity, and the data caps refer to how it's really a reference to how much video is coming across that connection for that household, because it's video that's really a data hog. So that would be my response there.
Okay. There's again, a question. I take it no one tonight can call in, meaning can speak. That's correct. If you have a statement or if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we share it with the entire group. Okay, next question. Do you have an example of a Massachusetts town of similar size to Fairhaven that has chosen this course?
So Quincy's about to send out an RFP. They haven't implemented the network. They also have to go through the process of putting in a municipal light plant, and that takes time, as we illustrated. So we don't know if, until that gets passed, we don't know that Fairhaven's going forward, and we don't know that Quincy's going forward because they've got to put in the municipal light plant. Wilbraham already has a municipal light plant. If they have the demand, which means they get a sustainable number of participants, they will go forward. But they're starting that process now of trying to assess what the demand is. So those are the three in Massachusetts. Wilbraham would be equivalent in size. Quincy would obviously be significantly better. There are 3 other Massachusetts towns that are in this process, somewhere along the road in planning, but they're not as far along as Fairhaven or Quincy or Wilbraham.
And then it's also important to note that we have currently in other states, not Massachusetts, 4 networks being deployed in cities and towns very similar in size to Fairhaven. And then, of course, a couple of counties are much larger. So they vary dramatically from the size perspective. Okay, next question. I appreciate your effort. Bravo. Does the monthly cost include endpoint hardware or equivalent to a cable modem, which typically has a much shorter lifespan than the fiber optics. Does the $55 cost include cloud ISP?
Yes, so good question on the equipment, and that's one of the line items that can be expensive. So the premise equipment, we call it a virtual broadband gateway because it's more sophisticated than a modem. And it's that thing that allows the cloud ISP, allows for the cloud ISP. So that is included in the original capital costs, and that is part of the $55. A decision that would have to be made, which is a policy decision, is we expect those devices to last somewhere between 6 to 10 years. If I had to pick an average, I'd say 7. So what happens 7 years down the road when that equipment has to be replaced? It will either have to be modeled into the monthly cost, or the network will have to tell the consumer when that device goes bad, you will have to replace it. It's likely that it will get modeled into the monthly cost, but that's not a decision that's been made yet. And it's a relevant issue.
It is, however, something that's included in the financial projections in the broadband plan. So we're very conservative, and we actually included that in the modeling. So that is included in the $55, figure. So, okay. Next question, how long to complete construction once approved?
I would say this network would probably get built. Part of the question is, will it be an aerial network, meaning up on the telephone poles, or buried? But I would say it'll be somewhere between 1 and 2 years that the construction would occur. I'd be surprised if it went beyond 24 months. It could be as fast as 12 months, but it's going to be somewhere in that window, would be my guess.
Next question is, and this is kind of a repeat, but a little bit of a twist. Are there currently any towns in Massachusetts running this infrastructure? So we've already talked about this particular model and who is moving forward with this model, but there are municipal networks. There are electric light plants, especially in Western Massachusetts, that have been running for quite a number of years. They're not the exact same open access model, but they do have fiber infrastructure that is managed by the municipal light plant. So, yeah,
there's a number. I'd say, I don't know precisely how many, but I would say there's at least 5 towns or cities that have built fiber networks in Massachusetts.
Yep. Let's see here. What is experience of Shorebury? I think that's how you pronounce that. Another Massachusetts town which owned their network. I believe Shorebury, I don't know if I'm saying that right, also has an electric co-op.
Electric light plant.
Yeah, well, electric co-op company is what they said, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that specific case. We'll research it. We're gonna do another webinar 2 weeks from tonight, or it could be a different time. We're asking for feedback on time. We're gonna do another webinar in 2 weeks, and we'll research that specific implementation. Unfortunately, I don't have any intelligence on that. If you research municipal broadband, there are examples of failures where it hasn't worked out. And there are a growing number of examples of success. And this particular model we have implemented, we have direct involvement with. It was implemented at first in a town called Ammon, Idaho. Fast Company magazine 18 months ago said that network is the best fiber optic network in America. And there's a whole bunch of, Harvard's done a bunch of writing on it. So there's a bunch of information about this particular model out there that we can make available. But we'll research that particular town. I assume it's a town, and have more information on it.
Okay. What percentage of your population will you need to opt into this plan in order to make it work financially?
So the lower threshold we would want is 40% of the premises in the town. It becomes sustainable at 40%. You get below 40, you can make the math work, but we want it to be more than 40%. What we will aim for is between 50 and 60%. So we're going to do everything we can to educate people and drive awareness. But it becomes sustainable around 40%.
And by the way, those that really understand this and really understand the value this could bring to their community, we encourage you to get involved, because your neighbors won't hear about this likely unless you tell them about it. So
yeah, not only your neighbors, but also the town meeting members. We need to make sure that the town meeting members are educated and have an opportunity to ask all the questions and get the details, so that when they vote, they've got good. And not just, we're not just trying to bias them this direction. We want everybody to have an opportunity to ask their questions and voice their concerns and really know what the variables are. Okay,
great. So the next question or response was actually going back to the Xfinity comment about, I just upgraded to a gigabit connection at $95. He was actually making that statement to help everybody on the call understand. He says, my first statement was reflection of gigabit internet with no data caps. I completely support the fiber broadband proposal. I was just offering a data point. So he was just trying to offer it, kind of where he sees his cost structures and throughput. Okay. Thank you for that, David. Won't the cloud ISPs be able to impose a data cap?
So the town will be able to set policy, and what we've tried to do is eliminate their incentives for imposing a data cap. And so I would say they are not going to have an incentive for doing that. And the fact that you can switch your ISP dynamically, literally in 60 seconds, would be problematic for an ISP that imposed a data cap, because people could just switch. But the town can also set policy. So the town could establish a policy that if you're imposing a data cap, you've got to advertise it right up front. So you can't surprise anybody. So we probably would allow people to do it, but we would force them to say that there are data caps and make it plain as day that they exist. The town could also say, you're not allowed to impose a data cap. So that's a policy decision that the town would wrestle with.
Okay, we're almost out of time, so we got to move quick. When I subscribe to an ISP, will I be getting two bills, the ISP bill and the infrastructure bill, Fairhaven / entry point? It won't be an entry point, I guarantee you that. Or will I pay an ISP bill, have the infrastructure price factored in, and they pay the difference to you? I guess I'm just wondering if I'd be managing two separate bills or not. Regardless, take my money if you can bring fiber optic to my home. So you want to answer that?
Yeah, it's true. So you most likely would pay for the ISP with a credit card. It's an online transaction. So we could look at alternatives, but more than likely the ISP would be just a recurring charge on your credit card as long as you're subscribed. And then if you unsubscribe, then it would eliminate that payment mechanism. And then yes, the mechanism to pay the town for maintenance and operation and infrastructure would be a separate bill.
Yeah. The one thing about this model that we really want to make clear is that all costs to subscribers are completely transparent at all times. You're not going to get a bill with all kinds of hidden fees and all bundles and all kinds of stuff that you can never make heads or tails of actually what dollars you're paying for what service. So there would be a cost for the infrastructure until it's paid off. Then there would be a bill like a utility bill. Most of our clients put it like on their water bill as a line item, right? So there would be a utility bill for the maintenance and operation of the network itself. And then your ISP would likely be handled just like your Netflix account or just like your Hulu or Disney Plus account. It would just be automatically debited or credited to your credit card. That's how most of the towns and cities we're working with actually manage the billing. And it's totally transparent. Everybody knows exactly what they're paying and what they're paying for specifically, okay? Another question, is West Island included in this plan? Stephanie, do you want to take that one?
All of Fairhaven is included in this. We're looking at using the poles, going underground. There's different prices for all of that, but West Island is included as well. And it is pronounced Shrewsbury.
Shrewsbury.
There you
Thank
go,
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're out in the West, guys. We don't understand these East Coast, you know. All right. What are the potential vulnerabilities? I think the best way to answer that is just to direct you to the broadband plan itself. There is the last section, well, second to last section is an entire section of all of the potential risks involved and what those risks are, why they exist, and whatever mitigation we think the town can use to safeguard against them. So it's quite an involved process. There's about 10 of them that we referenced there, and we recommend you actually take a look at that. And then finally, there's some people giving us references to Shrewsbury. That's great. Thank you for those links to those
Shrewsbury.
articles.
That's
Sure.
Sean. That's Sean Powers giving that.
Oh, Sean. Okay.
Thanks,
Oh,
Sean.
yeah. Hey, Sean. Let's see here. I have to leave the meeting. You all have done a fantastic job of explaining this. Thank you. Well, I think that's a great place to end. So thanks, everybody. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Another meeting in 2 weeks, and then there'll be more in April. Please talk to your neighbors and your work neighbors, and we'll start to have yard signs available in April. And it's also important to talk to the town meeting members. So thank you tremendously for showing up tonight and for your questions. And thank you for engaging as we go forward.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Have a great evening.
Good night.